Peter Gray, thanks for joining us today and taking the time out. What I tend to do with most guests to join us on the show is I spend a bit of time researching them and trying to piece together who they are and what they're about. It's really challenging with you because you've got such a breadth of experience and knowledge. Maybe let's start, paint us a picture, who you are, what's going on.
Who I am? Well, I'm a Melbourne boy, Melbourne born and bred, and I guess grown up typical suburban thing, and then ended up going through engineering at uni and getting into IT and technology, and started as a software developer, and really from there got into the early days of data and analytics. I was pretty lucky to get on a global project in the world of what they called data warehouses at the time, which nobody at that time knew what they were, and then they got very trendy, and then they got very untrendy. But worked in that whole world of data and analytics for a lot of time, and consulting, running consulting businesses, and building businesses, building teams, and all that type of stuff. And then have over the last, I guess it's nearly the last 10 years, have sort of been able to start combining the work with technology and into sports, and particularly through sort of, I guess, a sort of seminal moment with the Tour de France and being given the opportunity to get involved and lead a major project with the Tour de France. And I've spent the last 10 years working really around technology innovation, building new capabilities and new products in sports, but then also how that applies into other industries and other use cases around the place.
So what does that look like in terms of data analytics and analytics in sport? Like what's the playing field look like? What is the data you're dealing with, and what are the results you're looking for? Yeah,
there's really a whole bunch of things. So in sports is kind of like pretty much every other industry, on data and technology is becoming more and more important. And so if you look at teams or clubs, they're using data to optimize their athletes' performance, to measure to measure things like their power, measure their strength, measure their training load, optimize nutrition, optimize hydration, all of these types of things. So the same as you're wearing an Apple Watch, I'm wearing a Garmin watch. Those things are now taking more and more data about us and coaching us on things. This will tell me how much I'm meant to drink today, or have I over-exercised or under-exercised. And in the professional sporting space, or the elite sporting space, then that's then at another level where they're really looking to optimize that 1%, and so they're using data for that. But then if you look at sports as a business, and sports is a business, it's major sport organisers and broadcasters are making money, and they make money through eyeballs. People watching the sport, whether that's through purchasing tickets to go to games, to go to matches, whether that's engaging through digital means, through a website, through social media, etc., or whether that's through broadcast, whether that's streaming broadcast or traditional broadcast. That's the money in sports is largely tied to eyeballs, and it's heavily weighted around sponsorship dollars and around broadcast rights or digital rights, and so then data and analytics has a really important role to play in that, both in terms of creating content, so creating really interesting stories about what's going on, helping people to understand a strategy or what's happening in the game. We're here in Victoria, the home of AFL football, and you'll see the Telstra tracker and how many kilometres somebody run, and those kinds of things. They're kind of incidental, but they also just help normal people start to understand the performance of these athletes. So when you start to hear that player has run 15 kilometres during this game, you go, oh, okay, running 15 Ks is actually pretty hard.
Yeah.
And that's if I just go out and pace myself, and they're not pacing themselves. And so you start to get a bit of an appreciation for those athletes' performances. So it's part of creating a great product that's engaging for the audience, but it's also about understanding that audience and being able to measure what people are interested in, what do they engage with, how do I create better product that fans are going to get excited about.
And does that start to happen now across multiple streams of media? Like it used to be, if you were like the Tour de France, you'd sit up in the morning and watch the Tour de France, right? But now there's so many more levels to it. What other forms of media and what other types of engagement are critical to pulling that attention to the game?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And like the Tour, we talk about the Tour as like, it's a really interesting case study in this because the Tour is over 100 years old, and yet it still has a massive audience. But it was originally created as something to sell newspapers. It was created as content.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so you had a newspaper owner in France who said, I want to sell more newspapers. I've got to put great stories in there. So I'm going to create this bike race and get these cyclists to do crazy things like ride up, the French Alps and ride massive distances all around France. And each day, my journalists are going to write stories about it in the paper, and people will get excited about that and keep buying the paper.
Yeah,
that's where the Tour de France started.
Wow.
And so then that event has then evolved over the years. So through through newspaper into radio, into the world of black and white TV and colour TV and high definition TV. And so when I first actually got involved, it was at a point where they had, really an A1, highly produced TV product. The quality of the images coming out, like it's a travel newspaper kind of, picture show of the country of France in high definition in your lounge room. It's amazing scenery. You watch the Tour de France and people go, "Oh, I want to go to France." So it's they had that great product, but they knew that the audience is shifting. So we all know, and if I put myself back when we were kicking some of this stuff off in 2015, I was sort of going, okay, people are starting to move from watching traditional television to using streaming. If I sit there today, I go, does anybody watch traditional TV anymore? I know my mum does in her 70s, but that audience demographic has just grown older and older and older.
Yep.
And the younger audience demographic have completely changed their behaviours. And so, yes, there's streaming, but even then, they don't tend to watch long-form content in a lot of cases.
The attention spans aren't even there anymore.
Exactly. And so you've actually just got to package your product and package your content up in completely different ways that then suits the new channels, whether that's social media and every year you're reevaluating which social media platforms are going to be the most relevant or most impactful, because the audience continues to shift at a very rapid rate, but also through your digital platforms, so that when the experience that we the hardcore fans are really after is I can watch the high quality TV broadcast, but I want my second screen app that has all of the additional backstories and the
stats
data, and I can see everything that's going on, and F1 really has probably led that that transition, and then other sports, cycling included, have really been working on how do we do that in the context of our world. But you're always looking at, well, where's the audience moving?
Yep.
How do we package the product? How do we do things like create gamification around the event? How do we introduce people to the personalities? How do we bring in people who were not traditional followers of this sport, because the other dynamic that's happening around sports in general is traditional sports again aging with their demographic, but the world of esports, for example, is booming, the way that world operates is actually completely different to the world of traditional sports, and so the traditional sports are not competing with each other. They're competing with different forms of entertainment. They're competing with different things that people are interested in.
Yeah. Particularly in the realm of things like esports, where we're seeing now like a range of people that wouldn't have otherwise been able to compete in sport like that actually opens up this whole audience of people that were not necessarily physical, but had a competitive nature. And so now all of a sudden I can compete in a whole different realm.
Well, I think it's interesting because that's true, and it also opens up opportunities for people who maybe wouldn't be able to get down traditional sports pathways, because maybe.
Do you mean by access to?
Where they were born.
Yep.
What country they happen to live in, whether by their gender, age, ethnicity, or what have you, that actually that wasn't sort of the done thing in their community or what have you. Yep. So the esports world is kind of opening that does open up that opportunity. It also, I need to also go, but it also has a lot of challenges as well. It is has a lot of behaviour there that also is not helpful for minorities. But I think that there is opportunity in terms of technology democratising access for people. But as I say that, I also caution myself going, that's true if you've got an internet connection and can afford a computer.
And it's one of those things too where like it's very hot at the moment, to your point, because there's a lot of attention there. So all the sponsors all just go there. And then all of a sudden there's a lot of money in it. And then it becomes this thing of, well, now how do we reinvest that money to actually grow a platform that is providing all these other avenues that we're talking about? And it's interesting I was a video gamer as a kid, and parents were like, what are you ever going to do with that? It's video games, go get a job. Well, now you can actually have a job doing that. So it's a different way of thinking. In terms of the stuff that goes on, in particularly with the tour, what is the difference between the work you're doing sort of player side, race side versus then crowd side and spectator side? How does that appear? Yeah.
So maybe if I sort of go back to where we started, and as I said, we had this, the Tour de France had this great broadcast product, but they recognised they were a fair way behind the game in terms of being ready to engage on digital channels, and so one of the first steps that we took was to say, well, we actually need good data out of the race to allow us to create content for these digital products. So at the time, a lot of the information from within the race was captured via race radios and manual updates on TV graphics and things like that. So really where we started was using IoT devices on all the bikes to capture real-time information about current situation in the race, time gaps between riders, who's in what groups, all of this kind of information. And again, taking that inspiration, a bit from Formula One, where you were starting to get live telemetry coming from all the cars. Actually, okay, well, let's get live telemetry from all of the riders in the Tour de France. Now, the difference kind of is that that in an F1 car, you've already got a battery, you've already got a whole bunch of electronics going on in there. You're going around a race course which has connectivity in place and all of those kind of good things. When you go and talk about the Tour de France, you've got these super skinny, lightweight riders who are riding carbon fibre bikes, and they don't want you putting any extra weight on their bike, and they're riding through rural France and in the mountains and in the valleys and through horrendous weather conditions and what have you. And so, making technology that will actually work in those situations is a huge challenge. But we started there around being able to capture useful data, and then using that data started to tell the stories of the Tour de France. So data-driven storytelling. So partly that was giving access to fans to be able to see that data through the website and all that type of stuff. But also we created we started with a Twitter account called @LatourData. And the idea there was about creating little nuggets of content through the race based on this information. And so things like what was the top speed that they did coming down that descent. They were travelling at 50 kilometres an hour when that massive crash happened. The time gap between the leader and the peloton decreased by a minute and a half over the last 10 kilometres, or whatever it was. Just starting to tell those
putting it into a story that's easy for people to understand.
That's right. Just these little nuggets of information that people as they're watching the race, that's interesting. That's
the sort of stuff that's really easy to tell your friends, over the water cooler or whatever, right? And now I'm an expert.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, where we started to sort of understand some of the power of this, and it kind of sounds quite simple. And in some ways it is. It's a bit more complicated to actually do it. But part of one of the points we sort of learnt the power of this was in that first year we were doing this in 2015. We're just capturing data and there was, in the early stages, there was a massive crash. Probably half the peloton were on the road, and really by chance, because I'm a bit of a data nerd, I sort of went, I wonder what, if I did a graph of speed by time at the point of that crash, what would that look like? And, you sort of got, 170 straight lines that all just go blah, and explode. And the visualization was essentially just this, straight line and explosion of colours. Very meaningless kind of piece of information from a pure analytical sense, but it actually told a really interesting. It told a story.
Yeah.
And one of the team, our team who was running our marketing, looked at that and said, hey Pete, just don't touch anything, and literally took a photo of my screen and tweeted that out on LatourData. And that tweet, really took that account from a tiny little following to a massive following just overnight, because it encapsulated this moment that occurred in the race. And that's when we twigged to the fact that actually there's interest in this data storytelling around the event. But and so really from there we just continued to evolve and build in things like AI powered predictions. Who are the stage favourites for today? Will the breakaway get caught? What's the effort of riders who are in the breakaway versus the peloton? What time do we think can we predict what time the race is going to finish today? How quickly are they going to get to the finish, etc. So building in all of these different stories along the way, and just continuing to help explain the sport, explain the race.
Does any of this information, because it sounds like pretty serious information, particularly when you talk about riders themselves and their ability to improve or their ability to get better and understanding the mistakes they're making, is that data then given to them? Do they then look forward to the same sort of information?
Yeah, so interestingly, the riders and the teams already have they have access to a whole bunch of information themselves, and this is one of the things at the time I'd sort of look at and go, well, I could go for a ride down Beach Road and with my mates, and we'd all have our Garmins, and we'd be tracking all the data, and we'd pop it up on Strava, and I look at it and go, okay, I've got more information about my mate's Tuesday morning ride down Beach Road than I've got of Chris Froome's ride winning the Tour de France. So the teams already have all that data, but it just wasn't being made available to the fans. And so really the role that we've been playing is around how do we make that available to the fans in ways that is interesting and accessible, not just to the Uber fans, because that's a small minority, but to the general public, and help them to understand
the event-based experts. And that's that's another thing that's really good with sport in Australia particularly. We have a big sporting event and everyone's an expert on that event for that month. It happens Com Games, it happens Olympics, it happens World Cup, it doesn't matter what it is. As soon as there's something big, everyone wants those chunks of info, because that's the stuff where at least if I don't know a lot, I can make people think I do.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
The point that you made before about we're out in regional France, 5G coverage, network management, shoveling all this data backwards and forwards. What are some of the challenges and how are you overcoming some of that stuff?
Yeah, so ultimately, with the data coming from the riders, the big challenge was that all the interesting stuff that happens in a race, in a race like the Tour de France, is usually in places, the most remote places, up the final mountain climb, up Mount Tourmalet or something like that. And there is no mobile coverage up there. Okay, so you've got no existing networks. So the solution that's been developed uses the TV broadcast network. So the way that the TV broadcast works is that they've got TV cameras on motorbikes following the race and on a helicopter, and essentially they use an RF transmission from those cameras to a fixed wing aircraft. It's kind of like an AWACS plane, just circling up above the race. And then that gets relayed back to the race finish line, which is where the what's called the zone technique. That's the broadcast area. So all the broadcast and technology services, power, etc., is all managed in the zone technique near the finish. And so TV already had this method of getting broadcast signal back to the race finish. And so the solution for capturing the rider information was basically these GPS devices that could then hook in to gateways on those TV motorbikes and the helicopter and follow and basically be multiplexed in with the TV and sound that's already being transmitted. So you're leveraging that existing network, which is a highly reliable network. It's not cheap to run when you've got an airplane flying around.
I imagine it would be.
But it works really well.
Yeah.
And so these little devices, and I should have brought one in with me, but they weigh about 70 grams. But it's basically a battery, a GPS, a GPS tracker, and a radio. And we can get, well, officially they transmit about 1 kilometre. But in good conditions, you'll get up to 10 Ks, and as long as they can get to one of those gateways on one of those vehicles, then, as I say, that reports back. And so it's over the years we've gone from in that first year, we'd get what we call 60% coverage, which would be of every rider every second of the Tour de France, we would have 60% coverage. Okay, so that was okay, but not great. But as we've continued to evolve, then we're now at a point where we get 98, 99% coverage every rider every second of the Tour de France. Now that in the environments that we're working in, that's pretty amazing.
Does that need to be real time, or does the device have a cache? And if it drops, it's going to record data and then pump it out when it finds signal?
Yeah, so the ones we use with the Tour de France don't cache. They just, it is all pure real time. And the reason real time is super important for us is that we use it on TV broadcast.
Yep.
And so it needs to be real time, and it needs to be incredibly low latency, because if you're showing speed on TV and they're coming down a hill at 100 kilometres an hour, and then there's a hairpin bend, the speed changes from 100 kilometres an hour to 20 kilometres an hour very, very quickly, and then they re-accelerate. And if they're showing us 100 kilometres an hour while they're going around the bend, and then they start accelerating, and then the speed drops to 20 kilometres an hour, well, everyone watching at home is going, what's going on here? You really have a very low latency that you're targeting around all of that data, and you are focused on the real time aspects, and quite frankly also you're minimising the weight of the device and not putting anything in there that you don't need to have. In other scenarios, it does make sense to have a device that has a store and forward capability, and so that's where, for example, we now we track all the riders, but we also track all of the race vehicles, which is more from a race operations perspective. And then for that, we don't use the broadcast network. We do use 4G and 5G networks, and then we use some smart interpolation in the back end to sort of fill in the gaps. We know we've got algorithms that'll help us to figure out how fast they're likely to be travelling. We know that they're travelling with the riders. There's a bunch of information that we know, and so we can actually just use smart algorithms where there's a gap in the data to fill that data.
Because that data is not as critical to the real time experience.
Correct, exactly. It's not something that the fans are sitting at home seeing, and so you've got to look at those different data sources and say, well, what's most important? What needs to be real time? What needs to what sort of gaps can you get away with? And who's using it, and what's the outcome that they're trying to drive.
The devices on the bikes. So obviously, no rider wants to have any additional weight. Is there like a standard that goes in there that everyone on the ride has to have the same allowance? Like, what's the situation?
Yeah. So every rider has one on their bike. So again, when we went back to 2015, there was a lot of, really? What? You're not putting that on my bike? And there's a lot of challenges just getting the teams on board with getting putting devices on their bikes and all that kind of stuff. But over the years, that attitude has really changed. And there's a couple of things that have happened there. One is that the regulations from the UCI, who are the governing body, have said you can include the weight of the tracker in the weight of your bike, because the bikes have to meet a minimum weight requirement, right, and stuff like that. So it sort of mitigates some of that issue. But also, there's more and more an understanding that creating great experiences for fans is actually part of the job. As an athlete, part of your job's trying to win
sell
races,
tickets.
but you're an entertainer as well. And so this is actually part of promoting the sport, and the more that the sport grows, and then as an athlete in that sport, you benefit from that, or as a team in that sport, you're part of that ecosystem. So the mentality has changed over time, and it's just become normal.
The digital twin thing, this is massive in your world, and it's one of the things that becomes a bit more relevant in our space. Ours is a little bit different because, as a conversation that we've had previously, our looking at digital twins really exists in facility, and the nature of so much digitisation in call it a high-rise corporate at the moment. And I can't offline and online systems without interrupting workflow. So I build a digital twin that represents every operating system in the building, and off we go. And that's fast becoming a standard now.
Yep.
What does that look like in your space, and where does the digital twin fit in what you're doing?
Yeah, so I guess the term digital twin you can sort of apply in a bunch of different ways, and we've talked about the fact that we've built the digital twin of the Tour de France, and you you could say that what we've done with the riders is building digital twins of riders and bringing through that real time information. But really, that the intent in creating the digital twin of the Tour de France is really around operational management. So you have this big complex event that shifts every single day, and you've kind of got a plan for how things are going to happen. But the one thing that you can guarantee about a big complex event like the Tour de France, when you're in these remote areas, is stuff's going to happen that you don't know about. Okay, and you can also guarantee it's never going to be set up quite the way you planned and all of those types of things. So the idea of creating the digital twin of the Tour de France was really about having the flexibility to be able to see an as-built view of the event, have real-time information about what's happening. So, some basic things like where are all of the official race vehicles? Many of them are travelling along the race route. Whereabouts is the publicity caravan? What time should we expect the publicity caravan to come through the finish? In the finish village, what are the locations of all the key assets, the VIP areas? So these are trucks that sort of fold out a bit like transformers, to create these VIP spaces, usually multi-story. And whereabouts are they physically located? I know we planned for them to be here, and here, but because there were roadworks there, or that actually there'd been a lot of rain this week, and where we were going to park it, that's a muddy paddock. We've had to move it to here, and so the idea around the event digital twin for the Tour de France is basically to provide a single view of all the different things that are going on across the race, and a lot of that information probably historically was just radios, WhatsApp messages, SMS, etc.
We'll be there in 15 minutes.
Exactly, exactly, and so that works, but it doesn't allow the level of coordination that you really want when you're running such a high profile event.
Because logistically, it must be a nightmare, right? Like you say, you're invading small towns for days on ends with fleets of people. Yeah.
I always say the ASO, the Armoury Sports Organisation, they own and operate the Tour de France. They are logistics geniuses. This is a travelling city that moves every single day. It is quite amazing. Sort of look at the Formula One, and you look at Albert Park, and 3 months before they're setting up and what have you. The Tour de France, the trucks roll in at 2 a.m. They kind of park up, and then 6 a.m. as soon as the sun starts coming up, setup begins, and so the whole thing's built in a couple of hours. The race happens for 5-6 hours, and then the minute that the race is finished, it all starts packing up. And within 2 hours, there's nothing there. Yeah. And the trucks are on the road to travel 300 kilometres to the next stage. So it really is this very dynamic environment, and so that's why technology can really play a important role in what is actually happening at this point in time. Yeah. And because you've got so many different teams, whether that's the medical team or the security team or the race directors or the publicities and marketing teams or the people who are running the VIP areas, etc. They're all working in their own little worlds. But if we can bring all that information together and put that in one place, then the VIP teams can actually see, the publicity caravan's on its way, the security teams can see, this is where the race is currently tracking, if they've got road closures that need to happen, or there are particular VIP visitors. We have the French president usually turns up every year, and those types of things happen. Then again, everybody's got visibility,
like a universal source of truth, right?
That's right. And so you kind of really really start there in terms of just having that situational awareness of everything that's going on, and there is that single source of truth, instead of out of date radio messages or WhatsApp messages or word of mouth that this is what's happening that certain select people know but nobody else knows.
Yep. Has anything ever gone horribly wrong?
Lots.
Yeah.
The reality,
it's because for me it's scary, right? Like I have anxiety management issues just on a day to day. Whenever it can be something as simple as this podcast, and my mind consistently going, "Are we recording? Are we recording? Are we recording?" Like the anxiety that must come with there is so much data that's funneling in from everywhere here, and how we checking that it's all right, how we lining it up, how what's the curation look like?
Well, So let me. Maybe I'll tell you a couple of stories.
Give us the horror stories.
I'll tell you a couple of horror stories, and then I'll tell you a bit about how we actually how we try and avoid those.
Yeah.
But you're right about the anxiety, and probably over the years the anxiety reduces because we've become more mature in what we're doing. But when we started this, nobody had ever done this before. Like never. So we were making this up as we went along, and when we.
I'm sure you didn't tell them that though.
Oh, no, because the ASO who they knew nobody. They're the experts in the sport. They know nobody's done this before. And probably the bigger challenge were my bosses who are going, "Is this going to work, Pete? Is this going to work?" You go, "Yep, it'll work. It'll be right." But I tell you, day one of the first tour that we did, it was a time trial, and the first rider rolls off the ramp. So a time trial means that riders go off one by one and they get timed over a certain course, and so the first rider rolls off, and you're going, okay, data should be coming now. Should be coming now. No data, and you've got all the bosses who are all excited
Where's
about
the
this,
data,
looking over your shoulder, no data, and it ended up turning out that a late change had been made to the firmware in the trackers, and someone had got a bit confused about time zones, and the trackers are pre-programmed to switch on and off. Based on the race time, because you've got to conserve battery.
Of course, it's in a different region.
And somebody made a mistake with the time zone, so they were just off.
Yep.
Yeah, they were rolling down the ramp, but trackers were
data.
off. And guess what? When it's out there in the race, there's nothing you can do about it. It's gone.
Yeah.
I think on that day, the team on the ground raced around, grabbed. I think we managed to update firmware on like the last 10 riders and start to get some data. But when you talk about anxiety, when you've sat there saying, we're going to be able to do this, we're going to be able to do this, and then nothing comes through.
At least if like the first 5 are okay, and then there's a problem. When it's number 1, it's like, damn it.
Yeah, and you're checking everything. Okay, so this is on, this is working, this is working, this well. Yeah. But look, over the years we've had all sorts of things go wrong, and they can be as simple as in the zone technique, like it is a sea of trucks and cables, like. So somebody kicked your cable out, or broke your cable, or what have you. There's high tech issues and low tech issues that happen. But as a result, we've got we've built a lot of monitoring and observability into everything that we do. So the way we operate now is we've got a team on the ground who are sort of looking after the day-to-day logistics, talking with the broadcast teams, who are also there on the ground and doing all that sort of liaison and communication. And then we've got teams who are working off-site, who are providing really a lot of the core system support. And then they have monitoring dashboards and tools that basically give them visibility all the way through the pipeline of all the different types of sensors, of all the different platforms that we're running, and it's quite a broad array of technology now that we're deploying, because we keep on adding more stuff every year, and so they can then see pretty quickly if things are looking okay, or whether there's there's an issue, and that then allows us to drill down fairly quickly into, okay, we've got a problem here.
Yep.
And let's get that sorted.
Given the amount of emphasis on data, encapsulating data and translating data, there must be a massive R&D element to what it is that you're doing. And how are you internally deciding when it's time to move to a new platform or a new technology or stick with what's known and trusted? How do you manage that decision making?
Yeah, with what we've done with the tours is, we've built out a multi-year roadmap. So when we started in 2015, we worked on a vision together with the ASO for what we were trying to build out, and we knew and they knew you couldn't do that all in 1 year. So it was kind of like, okay, first year, and I think they had much lower expectations than we did. I think Pascal, who is the CIO for ASO, he said to me, success would be that we get live speed on TV for 30 seconds sometime during the Tour de France. Okay.
Great.
My boss's expectation was that we had live data from every single rider for every second of the Tour de France. And so you sort of manage, but we landed somewhere in between. But we had the vision of saying, we want to get data because we want to build digital products, and then we'll be able to do things like machine learning and AI, and we'll be able to create maybe new immersive experiences, etc. And so we built out that high level roadmap for what we were trying to achieve. First 2 years we had a reasonable idea of what was achievable, what's not. Beyond that, it's kind of in the world of fiction. But at least you've got a bit of a view of the directions that you're heading. But then each year we sit down after the season, because we don't just do the Tour de France, we actually do a whole bunch of races that ASO operate throughout the season. We sit down at the end of the season, we evaluate what worked, what didn't, where are our priorities for the following year. Let's look at that roadmap. We go, actually, that's not so important anymore, but this is. We're going to bring this forward, and we're going to push that back, and we restructure. We restructure that roadmap. So that's a really critical piece in terms of where are we heading in terms of the products and the objectives, and usually that's led by some high level themes around fan experience, around operational efficiency, etc. So we've got that, but then from a technology, from a technology perspective, you end up with information coming at you from a range of different places. So you've got technology changes. So these database technologies are becoming old-fashioned, and they're being replaced by these database technologies. And so potentially we need to look at upgrading some of our technology choices. We've got things that we're seeing happen in other sports that we say actually fans are going to expect. They're seeing at these sports, so therefore they're going to expect that at the Tour de France we're able to provide this service or this capability. And then you'll have other things where in other industries seeing technology trends or innovation that could play into the space. And so we've had another number of ways of just bringing in bringing in new innovative ideas. Some of those coming from the experts like ASO and their digital team saying, we need to do this, or we think this is a good idea. But others coming from the non-experts, doing things like running, we ran a couple of hackathon activities, within NTT, and targeted at people who weren't necessarily fans of the Tour de France, and not necessarily so focused on the technical build pieces, but the ideas. And out of those types of exercises, start to get some really good insights from people who are not so close to it. Yeah. That they
what matters to them.
They come from a bit left field, and some of those ideas have then filtered in, and typically the pathway for for new ideas or new concepts or new products that we might want to develop is that, they start as a science experiment.
Yeah.
So every year we'll have things that are running, in production. We'll have things that are, running in as sort of pilots, and we'll have, real science experiments. There's wires and bits soldered on, or there's, something that's just running on that laptop in the corner, or what have you.
Yeah.
That we're just experimenting. Can we make this work? And if that does work, then maybe we might move it to a pilot.
Yeah.
The following year with a limited release, and if that works, then maybe it's ready for prime time. And so there's always this pipeline of ideas and concepts. And again, major technology change. When we did a complete replatforming, a few years back, because the technology world had moved so much that actually there were better products for us to be able to build our core platforms on. And again, you build up the new platform in parallel with the old one. Parallel run for 1 year, validate that it actually works and does everything that you're expecting it to before moving across, and just making sure you've got those checks and balances in place.
With the with the approach of the fan side experience. Obviously, everyone's trying to come up with something that is an augmented experience or a virtual experience that makes you part of the experience that's happening. Is there room for that in the tour? Is that something that's coming? Is that something that people are working on?
Yeah. So absolutely. It's just a matter of finding where that really is sticky. Mm-hmm. So a good example, we built a really cool augmented reality application. Where you could, we're sitting here at a table, using my phone or my iPad, I could project onto the table through augmented reality, through the viewfinder essentially of my phone or my iPad, the day's stage in 3D with all the live positioning data from all of the riders, and I can select riders and things that pop up, and have the weather coming across. Really cool experience, and everybody who looked at that went, "This is awesome, love it, amazing." But the challenge is really around how does that become sticky, and you're probably not going to sit there with your phone in front of you for 5 hours watching the Tour de France that way.
Yeah,
it's a cool experience, and
you might jump on the Paladin at home and put on like a VR set and ride the race with the guys. Like
that's right. And so there's certainly those types of opportunities. And but I think it is really about just figuring out where do these things add value to the experience, and there's a bit of a balancing act between where is a digital experience, where does digital enhance the experience versus the human experience. Because the flip side, with the Tour de France is what makes the Tour de France so awesome. It's the natural beauty. It's the fans who are by the roadside going crazy, who are dressed up, bringing every their country flags, who are cheering on the riders, etc. That's a human experience, and that's what makes it awesome. And so when you think about the digital experiences you create, well, how does that augment the human experience and not get in the way of
or sterilise it is the other risk too. It makes it cheap. I'm not into cycling, but I'm a massive motorbike fan, and so the Tourist Trophy for me is very similar. It's that thing of you go to the TT, it's because you want to be there experiencing it, and watching the TT on TV is nothing like being at the TT, because now these guys are riding on and moving their head past bluestone walls and things of that nature. So, you're right. You've got to be careful not to wash away what the experience is about.
But I think there is absolutely a role, and one of the interesting opportunities around sort of immersive experiences is as you describe, what would it be like to be a cyclist coming down one of those Alps at the speeds that they they go down, feeling the vibrations, hearing the sounds,
the wind blowing past your face,
all that kind of stuff. What would that feel like?
That's translated really well to the racing car experience, and now you see even people at home who have got $20,000 sims.
Yep.
And they're racing on the same platform that these F1 GP guys are training on the weekend. Like, there's prize money to be won. It's a full thing.
Yeah, and look, the same thing's happening in the cycling world. And there's a platform called Zwift, which we've done a bunch of work with over the years, and that is an online gaming environment where I set up my home trainer, which is a smart trainer, and my experience in riding my smart trainer is governed by the game. And more and more I can get fans that will that will connect in based on the speed that I'm travelling. The fan will give me that experience, or there are trainers that based on the terrain will actually vibrate and give me that sort of feeling. And I can race against anyone in the world. That platform is now also being used by the pro teams, not just for training, absolutely for training, but also for talent identification.
Yeah.
And so what they're doing is there's an actual competition called Zwift Academy, where young riders from around the world all compete for basically a slot on one of the pro teams, and we're now starting to see riders who've come through that pathway who are now operating at the highest level in the professional peloton, and they probably would never have had that opportunity if they hadn't have come through that.
Same thing in F1. PlayStation did it when the PS3 was out. There's a movie out now called Gran Turismo, and that's exactly what it's about. This guy that got into racing through the PS Academy.
Well, and it's interesting. We also work with NTT works with IndyCar, and talking with a lady named SJ who was running their marketing, and she was saying the younger generation coming to IndyCar is more and more coming via gaming. So they're playing the games and then getting interested in the sport.
Yeah.
So instead of being interested in the sport and therefore playing the game, they're playing the game and then getting interested in the sport, and it's kind of flipped the story.
Hails back. I don't know if you remember an 80s movie called The Last Starfighter.
I do remember that. Yeah,
exactly
I'm old enough to remember that.
And he beats the game, and then someone comes from space and goes, now you got to join the Empire to beat these guys. So
I think I tried to show it to my kids, and they went, the graphics are so crap. I'm not watching this.
That's what makes it great. That's what makes it great. But yeah, it's amazing how that's happened now, and that is it's a genuine thing. It was fantasy, 30 odd years ago, and now it's the way things are going.
Exactly. Exactly.
Given you can't just be this attached to the Tour de France and this sort of stuff unless you're a passionate cyclist. So you are a passionate cyclist? You got a lot of bikes hanging up in the background when we caught up online.
I do. I'm the reason I ended up in this gig was that Dimension Data at the time, which is the company that I was working for, we're having some very initial conversations with the Tour de France, and I was running a data and analytics business here in Victoria, and passionate cyclist, and enjoyed riding my bike, and I've spent years and years sitting on the couch at 1 a.m. watching the Tour de France, and going to the Tour de France was on my bucket list, and all that kind of stuff, and so it just happened that through the organisational back channels, they were looking for somebody to, who could maybe help with this project, and I just managed to be in the right place at the right time, and literally this was, heading on holidays with the kids, and got camper trailer on the back of the car and all that kind of stuff, and you're getting a call from your boss, sort of saying, "Hey, Pete, what do you think about this?" And,
holidays off.
and then shortly after we're on a call with the global chairman of Dimension Data, and Dimension Data is a big company. Like it was.
We know Data pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah, it was 40,000 people around the world at that stage, and then part of NTT, which is 250,000 people around the world. So big organisation. So then you're on the phone to the global chairman, who's quizzing you about stuff, and he goes, "Okay, you seem to know what you're talking about. We've got a meeting in London on Monday. Can you be there?" And you're kind of like, "Okay,
yeah,
yep, yes."
Yeah.
You don't say no. And then, sort of by the end of that meeting, it was almost assumed that I was just that I would run it.
Yeah.
And so just one of those really, you kind of pinch yourself.
So I was going to ask, is that like a cathartic moment where you're like, here I am, and the two things that I'm the most passionate about, data and cycling, and this is the pinnacle of both, right?
Yeah, you're kind of going. You can't believe your luck when you're getting to take your profession and your hobby and bring those together. And that's not many people get that opportunity. And then at that point you're going, okay, I better not screw this up. But it's interesting. I get I've had the opportunity over the years to talk to a lot of younger people around developing their careers and all of those types of things. And I always say that because people ask me, oh, how did you get that job? Well, kind of I was in the right place in the right time. It was a bit of luck. And they go, well, that's not really, that doesn't give me an answer that tells me, I should do X, Y, and Z.
But it's sort of one of the most important things in anything that goes on.
But it is, it is also, it is the reality, but it is also about putting yourself in situations where you do get asked for those opportunities. So it is, and then being ready to say, to give it a crack.
Yeah.
Really, looking at how you can continue to develop and grow as a person, develop and grow within your career. Look at the things that you are interested and passionate about, and how can you so putting cycling aside, just from a data and analytics perspective, and that's a much more employable skill set, but continuing to grow your knowledge, continuing to build great relationships with people, build trust and respect, all those really basic kind of things about building good relationships, being somebody that people trust to ask to do things.
Yeah, and a lot of that, I mean, it's really easy when you're doing what you love, right? Because it's not a chore. And I think, to speak to that from aspects of my career, I've had jobs that I've loved and jobs that I haven't loved so much. At this point in time, I'm in the place that is probably the best that I've, and the way that your ability to deliver on all the things that you were just mentioning almost becomes second nature because I'm in love with it.
Yep.
It's really easy.
Yep.
I guess, and for any sort of advice or opinion, the biggest thing that my mind can't comprehend these days is just how much opportunity there is for the next generation of kids. Having kids yourself, are you guiding? Are you advising? Are you steering in the same sort of fashion as to the most important thing is what you love, or does there need to be a degree of sensibility there? You got to play it safe too. Like, how do you encourage that?
Yeah, look, I don't think there's a right answer. Because everybody's different. Everybody's tolerance for risk is different. You chatted about anxiety earlier. And some people thrive on uncertainty and change and the next new thing. Other people, really, that's too stressful.
It's horrifying.
That's exactly.
Yep.
And so actually, I think it's a bit about knowing yourself and what's going to make you happy. And so there's not a right answer. So I've been going through this myself recently. We've just launched a new business. So we've taken the stuff that we've been doing with the Tour de France and we've launched a new business. and so I'm now a founder and a CEO of this tiny little business. I've gone from working in a 250,000
corporate world
organisation, and so that's a bit of a scary step. But I've done the thinking about, well, what is going to work for me, because I know that I'm probably sit a little bit in that middle. I'm not a real huge risk taker, so I'm probably not the person who's going to sell the house and invest everything in this radical new idea. Okay, I've got 3 kids in school, and
that's right. It's not just your risk, right?
So I'm not in a position to do that, and it's not my personality. For somebody else, that might be their personality, but I'm also not the person who's going to go, I've got, I'm about to turn 50. I've got 15 years left, till I'm 65. And I'm going to retire at 65, and I can tick over the next 10 years happily in a corporate job.
Yeah.
I'd go insane.
Yep.
And so it's a bit about knowing, learning for yourself about what are the things that are going to give you satisfaction and enjoyment and challenge along the way, and what's the right amount of challenge for you. And sometimes there are going to be external things that actually you can't control. So you've got family responsibilities, or you need to care for a loved one at a particular point in time in your life. And there are different times in periods in your life where you need to make different decisions that are not also just about you.
I imagine like going on the tour and things like that takes you away from home for a while. Is that something that you got to be conscious of, and sort of how long are you away on average for a year, and what impact would you miss out on, and how do you come to terms with all that?
Yeah, well, it's not me who has to come to terms with that.
It's
my wife Serena, is who I'm so fortunate with how supportive that she is. But you're right. This year, I fly out on Tuesday. I'll be gone for 5 weeks.
Yeah,
that's a big chunk of time.
Particularly in a child's mind, right? Like it's if they don't see you for that long.
Look, that's right. And so that definitely that is not easy. It's kind of easy for me because I'm in the thick of it.
You'd be on autopilot, just getting it done.
And that's right. So you just fall into the rhythm of the tour, and it's hard and it's tiring and all that kind of stuff. But you know what you're in for. But no, it is more challenging. On the family front, obviously, leaving Serena to run the family for 5 weeks on her own and go slightly insane through the process. That quite frankly is unfair. And so I don't have a great answer. For that. But
well, round of applause for Serena.
Yeah, exactly.
Takes care of it all while you're away. Good job, Serena.
That's right. Now, fortunately, our kids are getting that little bit older, so it starts to get a bit easier. But no, that's obviously a massive
sacrifices,
massive toll. But and that she allows me to do that because she knows how much it means to me to be part of that, and so that's
such a cool thing. Such a cool thing. So you say you're off on Tuesday. When does the tour start?
So the tour starts Saturday week. So I fly out Tuesday. I'll arrive into this year. The start is Bilbao in Spain. We arrive into Bilbao on Wednesday. Thursday, basically all of the trucks arrive, and we do a whole bunch. Basically, Thursday is setup, Friday is testing, Saturday is the race. So it's
frantic.
It's chaos. And we've. It's probably not as bad as it sounds in the sense that we, every year before the tour, there's another race called the Criterion de Dauphiné, and that's basically a test event. So everything that's going to run at the tour, we do at the Dauphiné, which was just a couple of weeks ago, at the start of June, and so all the trucks. All our trucks and equipment were there, and we got it all up and running, across the course of a week. they're proven, tested. So when we turn up to the tour, it should be just
checks and
connect
balances.
everything up,
Cool.
and it should all just should all just work. There's a few pieces that will be coming in new and coming in late. It always happens, but more often than not, it should.
Yeah.
But it's the first few days. The Tour de France is a 3-week race, and then we've got an additional week for the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift, the first week is just manic, and there's stuff going wrong everywhere, TV broadcast, whatever.
Yep.
It's just the nature of it, and then by the second week it's all kind of settled down, and everybody's into a rhythm but crazy tired, and then the third week everyone's just okay, we're getting to the end, and
Do you get any time just to soak it up? Do you take a day or two and just go, nothing today, just be in France?
Not quite that luxurious,
No.
because there are rest days in the Tour de France, but generally they're often travel days, because there's often large transfers that need to happen on that day. So some of our worst rest days have involved 700 Ks of driving, and then get to the other end and do your washing. That's your rest day. But no, what we do is, as a team, all of us have sort of some sort of outdoor activity that we enjoy. So a few of us are cyclists. So we bring our bikes, put a bike rack on the back of our van, and we take our bikes around with us, and each morning try and get out for a ride, get some fresh air, get some exercise. We've got a couple of runners who go out and run in the mornings, or walkers who go and walk. So doing things like that actually is I reckon really important for your sanity.
Definitely.
Because otherwise it is very easy to just be going from hotel to truck to minivan to and you can miss a lot of the experience in the process. I know outside of the tour I do a lot of business travel, and I always say, look, if you travel for business, pretty much any major city in the world looks exactly the same. If you go from airport to a taxi to a hotel to an office to a hotel to an airport, every city in the world looks exactly the same.
Everyone's really excited about work travel until you start traveling for work, and then you realise that it is just work. You're just in different rooms. And I much prefer not traveling these days. It's just, I don't know why. I just prefer being in my little zone.
Yeah, I know. I think it depends. Work travel does get tiring, but there are opportunities. That
you see amazing stuff.
I've through work travel, I've had some amazing experiences. I've got to meet amazing people. But you do have to think a little bit. You do have to plan ahead. That's why I do like taking my bike if I can, because you can break that cycle of
you're falling into the comforts of home, and feeling familiar with things. Yeah, that makes sense.
And so just then and being able to get out and explore spaces and whether it's go for a run or go for a walk or go for a bike ride or something like that. Just getting out and seeing a bit of the city that you're in, or that kind of stuff.
What's your favourite part of France?
The Alps.
Yeah.
No question.
Beautiful.
I've
never been.
Everybody talks about France as sort of Paris as being this amazing city, and look, it is an amazing city, but it's definitely not my favourite part of France. I love being out in the countryside, and once you get into the Alps, We've driven the freeway from Lyon towards the Alps, many times, and you sort of in this flat farmland, and then in the distance you start to see these big mountains just start turning up, and there's Mont Blanc, and
they just get bigger and bigger.
They get bigger and bigger, and then they're all around you. It is an amazing place on earth. And so,
are you a wine drinker?
I am.
Yeah. So going to France would also be a cool chance to sample some local wines?
Occasionally it is, but I have to confess that we've not had necessarily great wine experiences over there. Some really, really good, but also some pretty ordinary. Yeah. So So occasionally it's wine, but also the Belgian beers are a strong favourite with the team. So end of a long day and a nice Belgian blonde.
Just to wrap it all up.
Yeah, it's not too bad at all.
That's amazing, Pete. That's it for us for today. We're at the end. This is, again, I came into this one with the least possible information, and you've been great to have on the show. I would like to do this again. I'd probably like to do it again after you're back, and come back and let us know some of the cool stuff that happened on this tour. And let's just catch up on the flip side.
No, thanks, Mike. It's been fun.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, mate.